Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bookaholic podcast. I'm Deirdre Pippins, and I am a bookaholic. Today is a milestone day on the Bookaholic podcast. I have my first guest. I'm going to interview my first guest, so yay, I'm making progress. Hooray. And I'm so happy that Karin Freeland has agreed to interview today with me. She has a phenomenal book, a debut book that's coming out titled The Ins and Outs of My Vagina, a Penetrating Memoir. Wow, if that title doesn't get you, nothing else will. And we're going to discuss today Karin's freedom, her journey through a midlife crisis, and how she went through and how it opened up her whole creative process and just reinvention of herself. Not only is Karin an author, a first-time author, but she's also a life coach. So in a few minutes, I'll get back and we will talk with Karin Freeland, the author of The Ins and Outs of My Vagina, a Penetrating Memoir. Stay tuned. Okay, good morning, Karin.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Let me increase my volume. Okay, there we go.
That
Oh,
better?
wow, I'm so excited.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me today.
Oh, no problem. No problem. Thank you for agreeing to my first time interview on my podcast. It's usually me just droning on in my podcast, and I've been promising my listeners that I will have some guests. And so, yay, yay. Thank you
Yay.
very much. Hooray. Well, let's dive right in. You know, your title, when I first came upon your information and saw your title, I thought, my 13-year-old self came up and I started giggling and I was like, oh my goodness, this is funny. This is hilarious. And I was telling my husband and anybody else that would listen to me, I'm going to interview a woman and vagina is in the title. But then once I spoke with you on a pre-call, I got myself together and I was like, she has a story. She has a point. So let's talk about it. How did you get to be the author of this book?
Absolutely. And I will say there are so many preconceived notions that come along with a title like that. Even
Yeah.
my girlfriends from high school that I hadn't seen in years, but I did a live when I first announced to my friends and family that I was going to do this book. And one of
Right.
my friends called me afterwards and she goes, oh, everybody started texting me. They think maybe you have an open marriage. And I was like, I most certainly do not. But
How did they get that?
because they figured what on earth could be going on with her and her vagina in a long-term
Right.
relationship that would be book worthy. And so
Right.
that was kind of the first thing that they jumped to that conclusion. So
Right.
so it's comical. So I appreciate the opportunity to kind of share the story because it's
Yes.
so much more than just, a salacious term or,
Correct.
gratuitous sex. Although
Right.
there is some sex in the book. So, it does not disappoint, but
Okay.
the way that this kind of came about, to be honest, started back in 2009.
Okay.
And I was pregnant with my first son and
Okay.
going to the
Exciting time.
gynecologist. Oh, yes, very exciting, but also just uncharted water, right? Like I had no
Right.
idea what I was getting
Right.
myself into.
Right.
And
Of
I was
course.
at the doctor's office and she recommended for her patients to prepare your body for birth and stretch out your skin so that you don't tear when you have the
Right.
baby.
Okay. Right.
And so she was explaining to me that I should put some olive oil on my fingers and kind of rub around down there and help the skin stretch out.
Okay.
Exactly. That was my thought. I was like, thanks
I never
for the
heard that
advice.
one.
No. I said, okay, thanks, lady. And I waddled back to my car, 7 months pregnant, and went home and just kind of
Yeah.
didn't really think about it.
Right.
And of course, I got bored on a Friday night and was like, well, maybe I really don't want to tear. That sounds terrible.
Right.
So let me try this out. And
Exactly.
it was a disaster. Deirdre, I mean, I'm talking olive oil flying everywhere. It's more olive oil is on the bathroom floor than on me. And I'm like, okay, let's just hope small heads run in the family because I don't
Right.
can't figure this out.
Right.
And my husband came home from work and said, what the heck happened in the bathroom?
Right.
And I tried to explain as eloquently as I could. And he was like, you know what you should do? I'm thinking, what is your great advice here? And he said, you should write a book and you should call it, I Don't Know My Vagina, because it's clear you have no idea how this thing works.
Okay.
And my first reaction was, that is dumb. That is the stupidest idea I've ever heard. Again, thanks for the advice. And I went about my business.
Right.
And I started to think about it. And I was like, you know what? I think we're onto something here, because I started brainstorming all these stories and ridiculous things that have happened with me and my vagina, who is a character in the book named V. So me and V have been on all these adventures together. And I thought, I think we have something here.
Right.
So I just started writing, randomly, when I could fit it in, but then life got in the way, as it does. I started chasing the paychecks, chasing that corporate dream. And it wasn't until 2019, when I went through a bit of a midlife crisis, that I figured out that I needed that creative outlet again. And I picked up this book and basically didn't look back. I just kept going. And now it's on the market for pre-order. It's amazing.
Wow. That is incredible. And, I was looking at your table of contents of the chapter names and the different parts. And I mean, it is all so creative. It is all so creative. I'm just going to, the intro is To Whom It May Concern, WOMB. I'm like, oh my goodness. So creative. Opening up, Hello V, Muff Tabs, Miami Heat, Sexual Peaks and Valleys, No Vacancy. Oh my gosh, what is this one?
Clamtastrophes.
Clamtastrophe, The Final Curtain. I mean, this is so creative, the title. So you shared with me you had some favorites. So kind of give us some background on some of your favorites in the book.
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the things for me that was so eye-opening as a young adult, experiencing my sexuality and kind of coming into my own, was the fact that I grew up in a very traditional household. The message was, you don't have sex until you get married.
Right.
End of story.
Right.
And I'm not opposed to that messaging, but what I'm opposed to is stopping the sex education there. And so here I am, like a young adult, going like, I didn't even know that you were supposed to urinate after intercourse.
Okay. Yes.
That message was never delivered to me. And so all of a sudden I found myself in the chapter called Fire Crotch with a urinary tract infection in the middle of a dance class in college, thinking that my boyfriend, now husband, gave me an STD. And it was one of those moments where I look back and go, how did I get so misinformed or so discombobulated with my own body that I literally thought a urinary tract infection was an STD? But no one had ever told me about those symptoms.
Exactly.
And when I talk to young women who are just coming out of college, and I've asked them kind of like, what are some of the things you're interested about learning that might be in my book? The health issues and the UTIs comes up every time as one of the top issues, because they aren't being taught this stuff.
Right. Correct. No, definitely. I don't think I ever heard about UTIs or anything like that. And I will tell you, our conversation is bringing up a memory for me. I remember, so my sisters are like 20 to 25 years older than me. And so one day my mother and my sisters were in the kitchen, and I was too. I don't know, I was young. I was very young. I was not yet a teen, but this was the sex education advice that I received in that kitchen that day. And it was, keep your dress tail down and your panties pulled up. And I was like bewildered. I was like, okay, what is that? I mean, and I was just told that phrase, keep your dress tail down and your panties pulled up. And I was like, what is that? What is a dress tail?
Yes.
Of course I would keep my panties pulled up. Why would they come down?
Right.
What? And I was like, what are they talking about? What
Right.
are they saying? And so I love the way that we have to take charge of our own health. Right now, my husband is experiencing shoulder problems, and he keeps calling the doctor, and he leaves messages, and so we just said together, you do have to take your own health into your own charge.
Yes.
You definitely have to be the forefront advocate for your health. I think a lot of people go to doctors and think they're the doctor and they can tell me. You got to go to that doctor and tell them everything you're thinking and feeling and all of these things. And I think that's what helps. Your book will help open that up for women. You've got to take charge of your body. And our bodies are going through different stages depending on how old you are. Like I was just telling you that.
Yep.
And then you first learn about your menstruation cycles and all of these things. Then having that first baby, then you learn a whole lot about your body once you have a baby. And then there is menopause and all of these things that people don't want to talk about. But, menopause is a real thing, and I think that's still the last taboo, if you will, of women's health. Nobody really wants to talk about it. People make fun of women having hot flashes and all these things. So your book is really a great opener about don't be afraid to use the V word. People use the F word. People use the F word freely.
Yes. And it's anatomically correct. That's the thing that kills me. It's like, I could understand if I was using other words, the P word, the C word, right? Things that aren't really appropriate per se, but like it is anatomically what we call, and it's one of the reasons that I think women shrink so much in our culture and in our society, because literally our body part is shamed. It's something that's dirty or disgusting or should be kept covered up. And I mean, there's certainly a time and place for everything, don't get me wrong, but
exactly.
When you're constantly delivered these messages about your body, you start to just kind of like go into yourself, and you don't want to tell people what you're experiencing because you don't know what they're going to say or think about you. And so once they read my book, they'll be like, oh, I have no problem telling people if she can tell people this stuff.
Exactly. Well, now that's why I like women who are in their childbearing years. I like the fact that they're taking charge of breastfeeding.
Yes.
That is the main function of the breast, is to feed a child, is to nourish a child. So, I like the fact that they are taking that and taking the shame out of that whole thing too. No, I think there's sometimes, you don't want the whole public to see your body, but women who are out and your baby is hungry and you have the proper wrap. You can be in a restaurant or an open setting as long as you have the proper wrap. And I feel that to feed your child. So I like the fact.
Yeah, the thing that I would love to get culture to a place where we don't judge anyone.
Right.
So if you feel comfortable to go out in public and breastfeed, you should be able to do that. It is natural. It is beautiful. It is wonderful. I personally couldn't do it. I sat in my own house with a cover up with a baby on my boob when no one was home. I don't know what I thought. Maybe God was going to see my boob. I don't know, but I just felt so uncomfortable. But that was me, right? That was just kind of, and I had a toddler who was usually kind of waddling about somewhere.
Right.
So I guess I didn't want him to see. And it was just one of those things that I wasn't that comfortable with. And you know what? That's okay too.
Exactly. This is true. And everybody's different. But like you said, let's just take the stigma out of everything. Yes. Now, let's talk about your midlife crisis. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, slightly less fun than my book, but but yes, but very pivotal to how we got here. So
yes.
I was chasing the corporate dream, trying to see how high I could climb on the ladder. And I got to this point where I just felt like all I did was make PowerPoint presentations.
Yes.
And I had lost 2 family members. My great aunt and my great uncle, I mean, they were in their 90s, right? They were older, but they were the last of that generation. And so it became very apparent that my parents' generation was next on deck.
Yep.
And it sent me into a complete all-out panic. I was terrified. I suddenly became almost incapacitated at some moments, and stricken with fear about what death meant for me and for my family. And I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would literally be like hovering over the sink in the bathroom, bawling my eyes out, hyperventilating, and going like, I'm going to die. And I can't stop that. I can't control that. And that scared me so much. So I did this honestly for probably 6 months, almost every night of my life.
Wow.
It was awful. And I was drinking a lot. So the drinking didn't help because I always had to wake up to go to the bathroom. So I was venting one day at work and someone asked me a very pointed question. And they said, well, if you're not happy, like what would you regret never doing if you die? Like if this is such a fear for you, then what do you want to do while you still have time? I couldn't answer that question in that moment.
My gosh.
I knew everything I didn't like about my life. I knew all the things that made me angry or frustrated. But I had no clue what I actually wanted my life to look like. And it spurred this journey for me to figure out, okay, well, what do I want then? And I was watching the movie The Secret. It was on YouTube. I don't even know if it's
I remember The Secret. I remember that. It was a big deal. It was a book. I think she went through Oprah. It was
huge. And while I was watching that, Jack Canfield, who is the author of all the Chicken Soup for the Soul books, was on there saying that if you want something to come to fruition, you have to take action. He's like, so I want to write more books. I have a team of people who help me write these books. And in that moment, the book I had started in 2009 that I had completely forgot about, it all came together. Thing that was buried in the back of my head suddenly was in the forefront. And I was like, that's it. That's my out. I'm going to write this book.
Yes. That is so, I mean, sort of sometimes out of tragedy comes new life, you know, out of death comes new life. I like you, and I'm glad you said that. I have death anxiety. I always have. I don't wake up in the middle of the night, but I'm constantly thinking about that. And I agree with you. You know, you have to, whoever that was that you used to work with was a pretty smart person, but, you know, to challenge you to think, well, what would you do? You know, you're going to die. What would you do? And that's one of the reasons why we're on this podcast also, is because I feel the same way. You've got to take action and you've got to live out your dreams. And if you just seem like you're just on that gerbil wheel, just going round and round, you got to get off. You got to be brave enough to get off that little treadmill. So that's a fantastic thing for you.
Thank you. And I mean, it wasn't easy, right? I kind of have gone through that transition, so I can stand here now and kind of wave the flag. But, you know, I was the breadwinner. So leaving a 6-figure job in corporate to be like, hey, I'm going to go write a book and start a life coaching business with 0 clients day one, you know, was a very hard thing for us to kind of go like, yeah, let's do it. Right. I mean, my husband was so supportive, thankfully. But, you know, it was one of those leaps of faith. I said, for once, I have to bet on myself. I'm going to bet on me. Because everybody in corporate is betting on me, right? I keep getting promotions. I keep getting more responsibility. Like I never went to school for marketing. How I got into marketing just sort of happened. Like, and I've worked my way up and become very successful. Why wouldn't I be able to do that for myself in another capacity? I can.
Exactly. Now let's take a sidebar to your husband. Now, it was very interesting. We did touch on him a little earlier in the interview, but he really was the one, a catalyst for this book, because he told you he knows all about his part. So what was that you said? That made me laugh.
Oh, it's so funny. He was just so confused how always, perpetually, I had no idea what was going on. I mean, even during trying to get pregnant, he would be like, so are you pregnant? Or, is your period on time? Is it late? And I'd be like, I don't know. And he's like, how don't you know when it comes? I'm like, I just don't know these things. Like, it's not regular. It never comes on time. It's very hard for me to track this stuff. And I had other friends who were like, oh, I'm ovulating right now. We got to go right now. And I'm like, how do you even know you're ovulating? When do I ovulate? So all these things were a mystery. And, when he's like, I can't believe you really wrote this book, I'm like, hey, buddy, it was your fault in the first place. You put the idea in my head.
Well, he certainly has been a very supportive husband, like you said. So that's a good thing, and that he made you think, about yourself, and so that caused you to challenge yourself.
Yes.
So I think that's a great thing. Now I'm going to back over this table of contents, and it is just so it's just so intriguing. So like part 1. It's opening up. So kind of give us a synopsis of that part 1.
Sure. I mean, this book really starts when I am 5-6 years old. And I first discover that I have a vagina. Like I, didn't really know what that entailed. And so there's some comical moments where I'm very confused about what I find down there. And my mom has to give me her expert guidance on what women's lady parts consist of. And I'm using air quotes for expert because it was anything but expert. I mean, it was like the type of, reasoning you give to a 5 or 6 year old, right? And it's kind of like, don't worry about it. You'll figure this out when you get older, but just go back in the pool. And so it walks all through those very early years of me getting my period for the first time, in that, anticipation and excitement, your body going through puberty and starting to blossom and change, and really demonstrating like my level of uncomfortability, if that's a word, like with my body and with anything like dating and boys and being romantic. Like, my first kiss, I'm literally, like hiding in this guy's shirt. Like, please just don't look at me. I don't want to have to kiss you. I'm so nervous.
Oh, gosh.
And then all of a sudden you get to Hello V, which is the second part. And it's like a 180, like hormones went into overdrive. I was in high school and I was like, anything that moves and has a pulse, hi, I want to hump you.
Right. Exactly. Definitely. I understand. Now, what about you and your girlfriends? What do you write anything about you, share anything about you and your girlfriends in those teenage years or college years, and things you thought and said or did?
Like some of them, especially in the early years, were much more advanced than me. So they were already kind of out there having experiences. And I would have to scrape my jaw off the floor when they would tell me about some of the things that they were doing with these other boys. And I'm like, were you naked? What? Oh my God. Why would you do that? Like, you came from there. Oh, like,
I know.
And I couldn't, obviously, because when you're those ages, generally speaking, that stuff is like pretty disgusting to you, right?
Yeah, sure.
And so then, you kind of grow up and these things like, oh, that sounds like fun. I'm gonna try that. So it changes so fast. But I tried to be very respectful of all of my friends and family and really not share anything about their experiences.
Right.
Only more so about how that played into what was happening to me. Oh, my one friend who was like constantly having orgasms and having this great sex life. Meanwhile, I'm like, I don't think I've ever had one. How do I even know if I've had one? What, and being very confused about what that even is or looks like, and feeling a little jealous even. But I really don't go into any detail of my friends or family because, obviously I wanted to be respectful and I changed all the names to protect everyone's identity.
Well, you know how when we girls or you get together and, then talking and things of that nature, there's a lot of bad information that plays out there too. Your
Right.
girlfriends don't always know information, and then you're still carrying mythological information into maybe your early marriage, and all of these
Yes.
things. So yeah,
Yes.
so it's important that your book addresses getting this stuff straight and accurate as well. you
Well,
know.
speaking of getting it straight and accurate, so the wonderful Dr. Lori Mintz, who wrote Becoming Cliterate, which is a fantastic book, actually endorsed the book. But it was
Yes.
funny because when she read it, she's like, by the way, do you realize you're using the word vagina when you mean vulva? And I'm like, sort of. I'm like, I didn't really realize that until I got most of the way through writing the book. And
Okay.
so she had me put a little bit of a disclaimer at the beginning so that we don't continue to sort of spread and use these terms for our
Right.
body
Right.
incorrectly.
Oh, correct. Most definitely. That was great.
Yes.
And
Oh, so helpful to have that. And just so
wow.
honored that she took the time to read it and to provide an
Yes.
amazing endorsement.
Yes, that is amazing. Wow. And when you're first doing something on a debut, you're almost kind of afraid to even approach somebody on that level,
Yes.
but I'm glad. How did you two connect?
I have a friend who is a sex coach, and she is very familiar with Dr. Lori and her work, and said,
Oh,
she's a great person. I've actually messaged her a couple times on Instagram. She gets right back to me. So you should
wow.
try reaching out to her. And I was like, okay. And I did. And thankfully, and she was
Yeah.
phenomenal. I mean, the sweetest,
Wow.
just most amazing woman ever. And she's been so supportive. So it's great to have people like that in your corner, because
Most
no one
definitely.
gets to the top alone. We
Right,
all have a hand.
exactly. Exactly. Well, so we know we go into pregnancy. So how do
Yeah.
you end? How do you pull this all together, the final curtain?
Geez, I don't know if I can give that much away. You got to read the book. But
Right.
yes, you will find out if I ever actually have an orgasm or not. It will kind of
Ooh,
culminate in that final climax or not,
right,
and see how that kind of plays out. But it's really
right.
those, like, now that you have children, also having to deal with, like, how do you create spontaneity in your relationship? How do you
Yeah,
find time to just not kind of be in that old steady rhythm of, like, okay,
yeah,
they're in bed. Now we're going to do it. And we're going to start in
yes,
this position. And then we're going to
right,
go to this one. And then we're going to
right.
be done. And like,
Correct.
you know,
Correct. Hey, listen, we still have an 18-year-old at home. He
you
goes to
know,
college, but he commutes. And so,
yep.
so hey, now I'll tell you what, I've got an idea for your next book.
Ooh, do
But
tell.
it's gonna take years. It's gonna take years for you to get there. But you gotta write a funny one on menopause. A funny plus
Yes,
accurate on menopause. But that'll be years later for you.
absolutely. That's right. I'm like setting myself up for a sequel,
That's right.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, write some more books in between, but maybe.
I know. I actually would love to do some more. Writing a memoir has been so much fun because you get to relive so many moments. But I would
Yeah.
love to try my hand even at something else, a thriller, something where you really have to work on that character development because they're not
Right.
built for you already.
Right. Yeah, a lot of people will probably say, "Wow, she's so young to have had a memoir." Now, I
Yeah.
don't know. Maybe that's my not bad point, but maybe that's my myth that you've got to be older to write a memoir. But I think it's just as based on you have something to say that you've learned from your life cycle.
Yeah. And don't let the Botox fool you, right? I've been around the moon a couple times. And people said the same thing with the midlife crisis. There's no way. I'm like, I'm 40. So
Right.
I'm lucky if only half of my life is over and I make it to 80. I don't
Right.
know, right?
Right.
Tomorrow's not promised. And
No.
that for me was what just set off this new chain of events where I was like, I gotta live. I gotta stop being
Yes.
this like zombie that wakes up every morning and does the same thing like a little
Yeah.
robot. Like it just
I
wasn't
know.
working.
I know. It can be daunting. I got off that corporate cycle back in 2005. And I'm just glad to have done it. So the
Yeah.
whole entrepreneurial journey, it can be scary. It can be challenging, but it is well worth it. We're in the area where our entrepreneurial journey is well worth it. So it definitely, it's just well worth it. I think you'll really enjoy this whole reinvention of yourself. And speaking of reinventing yourself, your coaching business is called?
Yes, it's Karin Freeland Life Coaching, but I have a program called Edit Your Life, and it just really fit in with the book so well because, when I would write a chapter, he didn't say, well, this is a bad chapter, start over and scrap the whole thing, right? My editor would just make a couple of edits, and then all of a sudden, this chapter that was good became great.
Right.
And so that's what I'm trying to help women that I coach to reinvent themselves and to say, look, you have the foundation of a good life, right? There's many things in your life that are probably working really well. Let's focus on the areas that aren't working so well, make a couple of edits, a few tweaks, and next thing you know, they're living these amazing, balanced, happy, energetic lives.
Yes.
And, it's such a gift, not only for them, but to everyone that they interact with, their coworkers, their family, their kids, if they have them, their friends. I mean, every single person they touch now gets to experience that person at their best.
Right. Well, happiness is amazing, isn't it?
Oh my gosh. It is. It sure beats crying in your car or in the bathroom at work on a regular basis. I can tell you that.
Yes, most definitely. Well, now, so The Ins and Outs of My Vagina, a penetrating memoir by Karin Freeland, will be sold where all books are sold.
Yes, so digitally it'll be available everywhere. We will also have an ebook, so paperback and ebook will launch officially on the 14th of September. For those local to the Greenville, South Carolina area, we are getting it in a few of the local Barnes and Nobles and a few of the other bookstores like Fiction Addiction. So make sure you shop local and support your local bookstores. And if you want to learn more about it, if you're not really sure if this is for you, you can go to the insandoutsofmyvagina.com and there is a free download. So you can check out a snippet of the chapter Fire Crotch that I mentioned.
Okay. Yes.
Yep. And they can kind of get acquainted with it. And if you're like, yeah, I want this now, you can pre-order your copy right now on Amazon or barnesandnoble.com.
Wonderful. So folks, get out there, make sure you pre-order this book. It sounds fascinating, and I think it'll be not only informative, but also fun. And I'm looking forward to reading it as well. Oh, some of your social media handles really quick are...
Yeah, at Karin Freeland, Karin with an I, Karin. Yes, so check out at Karin Freeland on Instagram, at Karin Freeland Life Coaching on Facebook, and at Karin Freeland on Twitter.
Perfect. Well, Karin, thank you so much for supporting the Bookaholic podcast.
Yes, we love what you're doing.
We're going to pre-order it. We're going to download the snippet. And I just thank you so much for writing this and for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been awesome to chat with you, and I'm so excited to share this with your audience.
Yes, thank you so much. And we wish you success.
Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot for Karin Freeland. I hope you got all of that fantastic and wonderful information. I'm just so excited because she's just such a positive individual. I just cannot wait for her success. And so it's just all really good. I'm really great and thankful for her visit with us today. So, yes, so I think as I move forward in my podcast, whenever I have guests, I think I'm going to record them just the way you see them. And if I have just regular information and it's just me, it's just going to be audio. So let me know what you think about that. I think that's the kind of the direction that I want to go in. So now don't forget, support your local library, support your local bookstores, and support self-publishing authors like Karin Freeland. You don't have to have a worthy book to come out of a huge publishing company. So support all your local people. And don't forget to follow me at Instagram at True Bookaholic, as well as Facebook and my website, book-a-holic.com. And if you got any questions or suggestions, you can reach out to me at reading junkie at book-a-holic.com. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your listening, your downloads, and now your video watching. All right, so we'll see you next week. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for joining the Bookaholic podcast. We appreciate your support. Remember to subscribe to the podcast, follow us on Instagram at True Bookaholic. You can also email us at readingjunkie@book-a-holic.com. Don't forget to support your local library and independent bookstores.